What if your love story was ripped apart not by choice, but by the clash of swords or the bitter bite of an ancient grudge? In the shadowy halls and blood-soaked battlefields of the Middle Ages, roughly between the 5th and 15th centuries, passion burned fiercely, only to be extinguished or tragically reshaped by relentless conflict. Could true devotion survive the fires of war or the poison of a generational feud? Number 7. The Scholar and His Student, a love that challenged God and society. The year is the early 12th century, and the city of Paris buzzes with intellectual ferment. Scholars and students flock to its nascent universities, hungry for knowledge. Among them stands Peter Abelard, a figure of towering intellect and equally towering arrogance. He is a philosopher, a theologian, a logician whose debates could strip bare the arguments of any opponent. His charisma is undeniable, his reputation spreading like wildfire across Europe. He is widely considered one of the greatest thinkers of his age, and he knows it. But beneath the layers of brilliant thought, a human heart beats capable of both soaring passion and devastating fallibility. Abelard takes lodgings in the house of Fulbert, a canon at Notre Dame Cathedral. Fulbert has a niece, Heloise, a young woman of astonishing intellect, beauty, and wit. Even in an age where women's education was often limited, Heloise stood out. She was fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, a rarity even for male scholars. Her mind was sharp, her curiosity boundless. Abelard, drawn by her reputation and her evident brilliance, takes her on as a private student. This arrangement, seemingly innocent, was a spark waiting to ignite a conflagration. As the lessons progressed, the line between teacher and student began to blur. Abelard, accustomed to intellectual conquests, found himself drawn to Heloise's vibrant spirit and keen understanding. Heloise, in turn, was captivated by Abelard's genius, his eloquence, and his passionate nature. Their shared love for knowledge deepened into a more forbidden, intense affection. Abelard, in his own writings, would later confess how their time together, ostensibly for study, became consumed by love. Under the pretext of study, he wrote, "We spent our hours in love, and the lessons were an excuse for the seclusion which passion craved." The books remained open, but their hearts were elsewhere entwined in a secret romance that defied the norms of their time. Their affair was passionate and reckless. Paris, a city of close-knit communities, was not a place where such a secret could remain hidden indefinitely, especially when one party was a famous public figure. Soon enough, whispers began to circulate. The very air around them seemed to thicken with rumor and suspicion. Fulbert, Heloise's uncle and guardian, was initially oblivious. Blinded perhaps by his pride in Heloise's intellectual progress under the tutelage of such a renowned scholar. But as the truth became undeniable, and as Heloise became pregnant, Fulbert's pride turned to incandescent rage. This was not merely a betrayal of trust. It was a profound dishonor, a public humiliation for his family, and for him as a respected canon. Heloise gave birth to a son, Astrolabe. To protect their reputations and to try and appease Fulbert, Abelard, and Heloise, secretly married. This act meant to legitimize their relationship in the eyes of God, only further enraged Fulbert. He felt it was a maneuver by Abelard to avoid responsibility or to keep Heloise from his care. In his mind, Abelard had not only seduced his niece, but had also compounded the insult by turning a secret marriage into a public defiance of honor. This personal betrayal escalated into a bitter, vengeful feud that would forever alter the lives of Heloise and Abelard. Fulbert, consumed by a desire for retribution, exacted a horrific revenge. He hired a group of men who, in a brutal act of violence, broke into Abelard's room and castrated him. This barbaric act meant to shame Abelard and disqualify him from further ecclesiastical advancement, was a physical manifestation of the deep feud that had erupted. It was a wound that went beyond the physical scarring Abelard's spirit and ending any hope of a normal public life for him, The separation had begun violently and irrevocably. After the mutilation, Abelard, in deep shame and despair, took monastic vows at the Abbey of Saint Denis. Heloise, heartbroken but resolute, followed his example, entering the convent of Argenteuil, where she had been educated as a child. Their physical separation was complete, enforced not by war but by the devastating personal feud and the unforgiving societal and religious norms of their era. They were separated by the irreversible consequences of their forbidden love, by the vengeance of a wronged uncle, and by the walls of monastic life. Despite their physical separation, their love and intellectual connection did not die. Their famous exchange of letters written years later reveals the depth of their enduring bond, their shared sorrow, and their complex emotions. Heloise wrote of her continued devotion, her struggle with her vows, and her enduring love for Abelard. Abelard, in turn, offered guidance and comfort. Though his letters often focused on theological matters and repentance, their separation was not just physical. It was a forced redirection of their lives, a life lived apart, yet connected by an invisible thread of shared history and profound affection. The feud had scarred them, but it had not erased the indelible mark they left on each other's souls. Their story became a poignant testament to a love that, despite being violently separated by a bitter personal feud and the strictures of medieval society, echoed through the centuries. Number 6. The Forbidden Kiss. A love consumed by family feud and fatal betrayal. Travel now to 13th century Italy, a land of fragmented city-states, constantly at odds, where alliances shifted like sand dunes, and family honor was paramount. In this volatile landscape, feuds were not just disagreements. They were blood debts, cycles of violence passed down through generations. Two powerful families, the Polenta of Ravenna and the Malatesta of Rimini, found themselves locked in such a deadly embrace. Their rivalry had led to bloodshed and instability, and the only way to forge peace, or at least a temporary truce, was through the ancient practice of an arranged marriage. Francesca de Rimini was the daughter of Guido da Polenta, the Lord of Ravenna. She was young, beautiful, and destined to be a pawn in her family's political games. Her father, in an attempt to end the bitter feud with the Malatestas, promised Francesca's hand to Gianciotto. Malatesta, a formidable warrior, and the Lord of Rimini. Gianciotto was known for his courage in battle, but also for his physical deformities and a somewhat crude nature. He was certainly not the romantic ideal a young woman might dream of. However, a cruel deception was allegedly put into play. It is said that Gianciotto's handsome younger brother Paolo Malatesta was sent to Ravenna to act as his proxy in the marriage ceremony. When Francesca saw Paolo, she believed he was her intended husband. The deception, if true, set the stage for an inevitable tragedy. Paolo was everything. Gianciotto was not graceful, charming, and appealing. Francesca, perhaps already heartbroken by the prospect of a politically motivated union, found herself drawn to Paolo's presence. Even if there was no initial deception, the sheer proximity of Francesca and Paolo within the Malatesta household in Rimini would have been dangerous. Paolo, already married himself and father to children, was known as the Beautiful. He was a magnetic figure, often serving as a diplomat and a military commander for the family. Francesca, now Gianciotto's wife, found herself living in the same castle as Paolo. The forced proximity, the shared noble background, and perhaps a mutual loneliness in a marriage of convenience, for Francesca, led to an undeniable attraction. Their love was a forbidden flame, a dangerous secret kept within the thick walls of the Malatesta fortress. It was a love that defied the very purpose of Francesca's marriage, to end a family feud, for it threatened to ignite a new, even more devastating feud within the family itself. The story, famously immortalized by Dante Alighieri in his Inferno, recounts how they read together from the romantic tales of Lancelot and Guinevere, a story of forbidden love. As they read the passage describing Lancelot's first kiss with Guinevere, their eyes met, and they shared their own first fateful kiss. That day we read no more. Francesca confesses in Dante's poem acknowledging the moment their love crossed the line of no return. Their affair, shrouded in secrecy, eventually became known. It is said that Gianciotto, perhaps returning unexpectedly from a campaign or simply growing suspicious, discovered his wife and his brother together. The exact details are lost to history and woven into legend, but the outcome was horrifying. In a fit of jealous rage, Gianciotto confronted them. Some accounts suggest he found them in each other's arms, others that he simply burst in upon them. The separation came with a swift, brutal end. Gianciotto drew his sword and plunged it, first into Paolo, and then, as Francesca stepped in front of her dying lover, he ran her through as well. They died together, their bodies entwined even in death, a testament to their love, but also to the savage power of the feudal system and the unbreakable bonds of honor and vengeance in medieval Italy. Their lives and their love were utterly consumed by the very family feuds that had brought Francesca to Rimini in the first place, and then by the desperate forbidden love that sprang up in the shadow of that forced union. Their story, so widely told and retold, serves as a stark reminder of how personal desires could clash violently with societal expectations. Francesca and Paolo's love, beautiful and tragic, existed only briefly, shattered by a husband's wrath and the iron laws of a world where passion often led to despair and separation by death, was the ultimate, inescapable. Number 5. The King's Favorite and the Baron's Fury. A love ignited, a life extinguished. Our journey now takes us to 14th century England, a land under the often unsteady hand of King Edward II. Unlike his formidable warrior father Edward I, Edward II was more interested in leisure and entertainment than in the rigorous demands of kingship. This preference, combined with his intense favoritism toward certain individuals, set the stage for a dramatic conflict that would tear his kingdom apart and ultimately separate him from his most beloved companion. The object of Edward's affection was Piers Gaveston, a Gascon knight who had been exiled by Edward I for his perceived undue influence over the then prince. Upon his father's death in 1307, Edward II immediately recalled Gaveston, showering him with titles, lands, and unprecedented power. Gaveston was made Earl of Cornwall, a title traditionally reserved for members of the royal family, and even served as regent when Edward left England for his marriage to Isabella of France. Chronicles from the era, such as those by Geoffrey Le Baker, recount the lavish gifts and the almost obsessive devotion Edward showed Gaveston, describing him as a second king, or brother. Their relationship was undoubtedly intense, far exceeding the typical bond between a monarch and his courtier. Historians widely acknowledge the profound affection and possibly romantic love that existed between Edward and Gaveston. Edward's complete reliance on Gaveston, his willingness to ignore the advice of his seasoned nobles, and his blatant disregard for traditional courtly decorum in favor of Gaveston alienated nearly every powerful baron in England. Gaveston, for his part, was arrogant and often insulting, giving mocking nicknames to the most powerful magnate. This combination of the king's excessive favoritism and Gaveston's provocative behavior ignited a powerful and unified feud between the English nobility and the royal favorite. The barons, led by Edward's cousin Thomas, Earl of Lancaster, a powerful and fiercely traditional magnate, saw Gaveston as an intolerable threat to the stability of the kingdom and their own traditional rights. They viewed him as a pernicious influence on the king, draining the royal treasury and undermining the authority of the crown. This was not just a personal dislike. It was a political war waged by the great lords of the realm against what they perceived as an illegitimate and dangerous power. They repeatedly demanded Gaveston's banishment, presenting a series of formal complaints and ordinances, essentially a list of demands for royal reform. Edward, however, refused to be separated from Gaveston. Each banishment was short, lived with Edward, finding excuses to recall his favorite. This infuriated the barons, further turning their feud into an open rebellion. In 1312, after Gaveston's latest return from exile, the barons launched a military campaign to capture him. They pursued him relentlessly, a literal manhunt across England. Gaveston, cornered and desperate, surrendered to the Earl of Pembroke, who promised him safe conduct and custody until the king's return. But the feuding barons had no intention of allowing Gaveston to slip away again. Despite Pembroke's promise, Gaveston was seized by the Earl of Warwick and Thomas, Earl of Lancaster, at the village of Dedington. The barons took matters into their own hands. Ignoring any pretense of royal justice or mercy, they brought Gaveston to Blacklow Hill, a spot near Warwick, and without formal trial executed him. He was run through with a sword and then beheaded. The execution of Piers Gaveston was the ultimate act of separation, a brutal and irreversible severing of the king from his beloved companion. This act plunged England into a deeper political crisis, a protracted war between the king and his barons that would plague Edward's entire reign. Edward was devastated by Gaveston's death, a wound that never truly healed. Though he would later find other favorites, none would hold the same place in his heart as Piers. The feudal conflict, driven by baronial fury and a king's misplaced loyalty, had not only separated two men, but had also set a dangerous precedent for future royal baronial relations, leading ultimately to Edward II's. Oh, their separation, wrought by the unrelenting feud of the English nobility, left an indelible mark on Edward's reign and the course of English history. Number 4. The Lioness and the King, a power struggle that shattered a kingdom. Cross the English Channel now to the 12th century, a time of immense power and shifting allegiances. Here, two figures of almost mythical status, Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II of England, began their intertwined lives, a relationship that would become a battleground of ambition, power, and eventually a devastating marital feud. Eleanor, Duchess of Aquitaine, was perhaps the most powerful woman in medieval Europe. She inherited vast, wealthy lands in southwestern France, making her a prize of immense political importance. She had been Queen of France for 15 years, married to Louis VII, but their union was largely barren of male heirs and marked by personality. Tashes. Their marriage was annulled in 1152. Just 2 months after her annulment, Eleanor made a startling move. She married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou, a man 11 years her junior. Henry was ambitious, energetic, and possessed an almost insatiable hunger for power and land. This marriage instantly created the Angevin Empire, a sprawling dominion stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees, covering more of France than the King of France himself. Controlled, their union was initially one of immense passion and political synergy. They produced 8 children, including 5 sons, a crucial feat for securing dynastic succession. Together, they were a formidable pair, their combined strength and intellect shaping the political landscape of Europe. However, beneath the surface of shared power and dynastic success, tensions began to brew. Henry was a man of restless energy, constantly traveling, constantly campaigning, and ruthlessly consolidating his power. Eleanor, equally strong-willed and accustomed to her own authority as a duchess, found herself increasingly marginalized within Henry's sphere of influence. She had brought him vast lands, but now she was often treated as simply the mother of his heirs, rather than a co-ruler. Henry's numerous rumored infidelities also began to chip away at their relationship, notably his lengthy affair with Rosamund Clifford. The turning point came in the late 1160s and early 1170s. Eleanor returned to her dower lands in Aquitaine, where she established her own court, fostering a vibrant culture of chivalry and troubadour poetry. This move was not just cultural. It represented a reassertion of her independent authority. When Henry sought to exert more control over her Aquitaine, and when he refused to grant his eldest son, Henry the young king, any real power, a dangerous feud erupted within the royal family. In 1173, Eleanor openly supported her sons, Henry the young king, Richard, later Richard the Lionheart, and Geoffrey in their rebellion against their father, Henry II. This was not a minor disagreement, it was a full-scale family war, a devastating civil conflict that tore through the Angevin Empire. Eleanor actively encouraged her sons, even dispatching them with supplies and advice. She rode through her Aquitaine, raising support and funds for the rebellion. She was a general in her own right, fighting for her sons' rights and perhaps her own reassertion of power. The rebellion ultimately failed. Henry II, a brilliant military commander, crushed his rebellious sons and captured Eleanor in 1174 as she attempted to flee. His punishment for her defiance was severe and prolonged. For the next 16 years, Eleanor of Aquitaine, the once powerful Duchess and Queen, was held under house arrest in various castles across England, including Winchester and Salisbury. This was a forced separation, not by external warfare between kingdoms, but by the bitter internal feud of a royal family, a brutal struggle for power between husband and wife, father and sons. During her imprisonment, Eleanor and Henry were separated by more than just stone walls. Their relationship, once a partnership, became one of captor and captive. She was only occasionally allowed out for state occasions such as Christmas court. Her children, though nominally reconciled with Henry II, were separated from her for large stretches of their formative years. This long separation, imposed by Henry II's victory in the family feud, effectively ended their marriage in all but name. When Henry II died in 1189, Eleanor was immediately released by her son Richard the Lionheart, who became king. She emerged from her long confinement, not broken, but as fierce and politically astute as ever, proving that even a prolonged separation imposed by a brutal personal feud could not extinguish the spirit of the lioness. Number 3. The Queen and the Tyrant. A reign forged in rebellion and broken by betrayal. Our next tale unfolds in 14th century England, a period marked by political intrigue, royal incompetence, and the constant threat of civil unrest. The central figure is Isabella of France, the beautiful and spirited Queen of England, wife of the ill-fated Edward II. Edward's disastrous reign, characterized by his extreme favoritism towards Piers Gaveston, as we have seen, and later Hugh Despenser the Younger, had alienated almost all of his magnates and crippled the kingdom. Isabella, initially a dutiful wife and queen, found herself increasingly sidelined and humiliated by her husband's blatant disregard for her and their children, and by the arrogance of the Despensers, who controlled the king. It was during a diplomatic mission to France in 1325, ostensibly to negotiate a peace treaty with her brother King Charles IV, that Isabella's fate took a dramatic turn. In Paris, she met Roger Mortimer, a powerful Markshire lord who had been imprisoned by Edward II for his opposition to the Despensers, but had made a daring escape from the Tower of London. Mortimer was medacate, ambitious, and deeply resentful of Edward II and his favorites. Their shared hatred of the Despensers and Edward's misrule forged an immediate bond. What began as a political alliance quickly blossomed into a passionate and scandalous affair. Isabella and Mortimer's relationship became the engine of a powerful and dangerous war against the English crown. They formed a coalition of English exiles and discontented nobles in France, openly planning an invasion to depose Edward II and rid England of the Despensers. Isabella, using her royal status and connections, garnered support from her brother, and even arranged a marriage alliance for her young son Edward, the future Edward III, with Philippa of Hainault, securing crucial military support. In September 1326, Isabella and Mortimer launched their invasion of England. Their forces were small but well supported by disgruntled elements within England. The war was swift and brutal. Edward II's regime, already teetering, collapsed. The Despensers were captured and executed with savage public displays, a testament to the hatred they had inspired. Edward II was captured, and in a groundbreaking and shocking act, was formally deposed by Parliament In January 1327, power now rested firmly in the hands of Isabella and Mortimer, who ruled as regents for the young Edward III. Their ascension to power was the direct result of a successful war waged against the established authority. However, their triumph was short. Lived their rule quickly devolved into a new form of tyranny. Mortimer amassed vast wealth and power, often acting as the de facto ruler of England, while Isabella became his willing accomplice. They alienated many of the very nobles who had supported their rise. Their luxurious lifestyle and heavy-handed rule, combined with rumors of Isabella's continued affair with Mortimer, created a fresh wave of discontent. A new feud began to simmer, this time against Isabella and Mortimer themselves, led by young King Edward III, who chafed under their restrictive regency. Edward III, though young, was determined to assert his own authority. In 1330, he launched a daring coup with the help of loyal nobles. He surprised Isabella and Mortimer at Nottingham Castle, entering through a secret passage. Mortimer was captured in Isabella's chambers. The separation was immediate and brutal. Mortimer was dragged away, tried for treason, and executed at Tyburn on 29 November 1330, just 4 years after their triumphant invasion. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered, a grim end for a man who had risen so high. Isabella was spared execution due to her royal status, but she was effectively confined to various royal manors for the rest of her life, living in comfortable but enforced retirement. She was separated from her power, her political influence, and most significantly from Roger Mortimer, the man with whom she had waged a war to overthrow a king. Their ultimate separation, by execution and confinement, was a direct consequence of the political war they had initiated, and the subsequent feud that rose against their own tyrannical rule. Their story is a stark reminder that even those who wage war and win can still fall victim to the unending cycles of conflict and betrayal in the brutal world of medieval power politics. Number 2. The Mercenary and the Duke's Daughter. Love in the Shadow of Swords. Let us journey to 14th century Italy, once more, a fractured land of competing city-states, each employing vast mercenary armies to press their claims. In this chaotic landscape, fortunes could be made and lost with frightening speed, and loyalty was often a commodity. Sir John Hawkwood, an English knight, rose to become one of the most famous and successful condottieri, or mercenary captains of his age. He was a master tactician, a ruthless commander, and a survivor in a profession where life was cheap. He fought for various city-states: Pisa, Florence, Milan, the Pope, often switching allegiances based on the best pay or strategic advantage. His life was war. In the midst of this turbulent existence, Hawkwood forged a powerful, if unconventional, alliance. In 1377, he married Donina Malatesta. Donina was no ordinary noblewoman. She was the illegitimate daughter of Bernabo Visconti, the tyrannical and immensely powerful Lord of Milan. Bernabo was one of the wealthiest and most feared rulers in Italy, a man who kept hundreds of hunting dogs and punished subjects with grotesque brutality. His decision to marry his daughter to Hawkwood was a strategic move meant to cement Hawkwood's loyalty and prevent him from fighting against Milan, particularly in the ongoing war between Bernabo and the papacy. Their marriage, though arranged, appears to have been a lasting one, producing children. Donina, as the daughter of Bernabo, brought wealth and status to the union, but also a deep connection to the volatile politics of Milan. Hawkwood, though a powerful figure himself, was now intricately linked to one of Italy's most formidable families. Their lives and their love were not separated by a single dramatic event of war or feud, but rather constantly defined, constrained, and periodically separated by the very nature of Hawkwood's. His great company was constantly marching, besieging, and fighting across the Italian peninsula. He would be away for months, sometimes years, leading his men into battle, negotiating treaties, or plundering the countryside. Donina would have remained in fortified castles or wealthy cities awaiting his return, living under the constant threat of news of battle, injury, or death. The very structure of their lives enforced the separation. A separation dictated by the rhythms of war. The feud in their story was the perpetual state of conflict in Italy. Hawkwood, despite his marriage to Donina, occasionally found himself fighting against his father-in-law, Bernabo, or against other Visconti family members due to shifting political alignments or mercenary contacts. These were not personal feuds, but the larger, relentless feuds between Italian city-states and powerful families which constantly put Hawkwood and his family at risk. For example, he later joined the Florentine League against Bernabo in the War of the Eight Saints. Imagine the tension within the family, the divided loyalties, and the very real danger that these macro-level feuds posed to his wife and children. Donina herself was a product of this environment. Her father, Bernabo, was eventually overthrown and imprisoned by his own nephew, Gianciotto Visconti, in a vicious family coup. This political feud within the Visconti family directly impacted Donina's life, stripping her father of his power and property. Hawkwood, ever the pragmatist, later fought for Gianciotto, ensuring his own survival and his family's position, even as his father-in-law wasted away in prison. So, while there was no singular dramatic moment of separation, like the others, the story of Sir John Hawkwood and Donina Malatesta is one of a relationship constantly perturbed by the demands of war and perpetually shaped by the relentless political feuds of medieval Italy. Their love had to endure long absences, the threat of battle, the shifting allegiances that could turn former allies into deadly enemies, and the ever-present danger of violence. It was a love lived in the shadow of swords, a testament to enduring affection in a time when peace was a fleeting dream and separation by the call of battle or the shifting tides of conflict was an unavoidable reality. Number 1, the Empress and the Marcher Lord, a reign forged in rebellion and broken by betrayal. Let's conclude our journey by returning to the tempestuous 14th century in England, a time of political instability and dramatic power shifts. Our final couple is one of the most infamous in English history, Queen Isabella of France and Roger Mortimer. While we touched upon their story earlier in the context of Isabella's rebellion, we will delve deeper into the nature of their bond and its ultimate devastating separation. Isabella, often known as the She-Wolf of France, arrived in England as a young bride, marrying King Edward II. Her initial years were challenging, marked by her husband's indifference and his obsessive favoritism toward Piers Gaveston. As Gaveston's influence waned, another royal favorite, Hugh Despencer, the younger, rose to power. Despencer's greed and arrogance were even more pronounced, leading to open hostility from the English nobility. Isabella herself became a victim of Despencer's machinations, experiencing humiliation and a reduction in her dower lands and income. Her relationship with Edward II deteriorated into mutual antipathy bordering on a personal feud. She felt despised and powerless in her own court. Roger Mortimer, a powerful and ambitious Marcher Lord, had been a prominent opponent of Edward II and the Despensers. He had endured imprisonment in the Tower of London for his defiance, a grim testament to his unwavering opposition. His daring escape from the Tower, a feat of legend, showcased his ruthlessness and cunning. When Isabella traveled to France in 1325, ostensibly on a diplomatic mission, she found a ready ally in Mortimer. Both shared a burning hatred for the Despensers and a deep contempt for Edward II's rule. Their bond quickly evolved beyond mere political convenience. Chronicles from the era, such as those by Geoffrey the Baker, suggest a passionate romantic relationship blossomed between the Queen and the exiled Lord. They were both powerful monarchs and driven by a desire for retribution against Edward II. Their affair became the central engine of a revolutionary war against the English crown. Isabella, leveraging her royal status and French connections, openly defied her husband, assembling an invasion force with Mortimer's strategic genius at its core. The invasion of England in 1326 was a swift and decisive victory. Edward II's kingdom, already fractured by internal dissent and the pervasive unpopularity of the Despensers, crumbled quickly. The Despensers were captured and subjected to brutal public executions, vivid demonstrations of the intense feud that had been waged against them. Edward II himself was captured and, in an unprecedented act, was deposed by Parliament in early 1327. Isabella and Mortimer had overthrown a king, ushering in a new, albeit short-lived, era of their joint rule. Their triumph, however, contained the seeds of their downfall. While Isabella and Mortimer enjoyed immense power as regents for the young Edward III, their governance quickly became as tyrannical as the regime they had overthrown. Mortimer, in particular, amassed vast wealth and influence, often sidelining Isabella's son, the rightful king. Their opulent lifestyle and overbearing rule, coupled with the ongoing scandal of their relationship, alienated many of the very nobles who had initially supported their rebellion. A new feud began to brew, this time against them, orchestrated by the young King Edward III, who, despite his youth, possessed a sharp mind and a growing ambition. Edward III, now aged 18, chafed under Mortimer's dominant influence and his mother's complicity. He resented the power they wielded and the disrespect shown to his royal authority. He secretly formed an alliance with discontented nobles who shared his desire to oust Mortimer and restore true royal power. In October 1330, Edward III launched a daring coup. With a small, loyal force, he entered Nottingham Castle through a secret underground passage, surprising Isabella and Mortimer in their chambers. The confrontation was swift and decisive. Mortimer was seized, dragged away from Isabella, and immediately charged with treason. Their separation was brutally enforced by the king's men. Mortimer was hastily tried, and on 29 November 1330, he was executed at Tyburn. He suffered the horrific fate of being hanged, drawn, and quartered, a public and humiliating end for the man who had briefly been the de facto ruler of England. His death was the ultimate, irreversible separation from Isabella, a direct consequence of the political war they had waged, and the subsequent feud that rose against their own ambition. Isabella was spared the ultimate penalty due to her status as Queen Mother, but her political power was irrevocably stripped away. She was placed under effective house arrest for the remainder of her life, living in comfortable but enforced retirement at various royal manors, including Castle Rising. She was separated from her beloved Mortimer, and from the political stage where she had played such a dominant, if controversial. The war they had waged against Edward II and the subsequent feud that led to their own downfall tore them apart, leaving one dead and the other isolated. A powerful testament to the volatile and unforgiving nature of medieval politics.